Ever feel like you're just going around and around, trying to solve the same problems over and over again?
Well, today we're going on a deep dive into some really interesting ideas from A Course in Miracles, specifically Lesson 80, that challenge us to rethink how we usually approach problems. It suggests our problems might already be solved.
Mm, it definitely makes you think.
Yeah, and right away, Lesson 80 just throws out this statement, let me recognize my problems have been solved. So is it saying that, like, paying bills, work deadlines, all those relationship issues, are we supposed to think they're just illusions?
Not really. It's
Right.
not saying that problems don't actually exist, but it's more about how we see them. How our perception can make things feel so much worse, and even stop us from finding solutions. It's often clouded by fear and anxiety.
Okay, I get it. So it's like our fear is making things harder. Like it's adding another layer of difficulty on top of the problem, making the mountain seem even higher than it actually is. Exactly. That's a great way to put it. And that's where this whole idea of a divine solution comes in. A Course in Miracles suggests that there's a way to approach problems that aligns us with a higher level of awareness, like a kind of universal intelligence that's always there.
I'm trying to understand this divine solution thing. Is it like some magical force just comes in and fixes everything, or is it more about tapping into something inside ourselves?
It's more like this. When we're totally consumed by fear and worry, it's like looking through a narrow tunnel. All we can see is the problem, and we feel completely stuck. But A Course in Miracles is inviting us to shift our perspective, to step out of that tunnel and see that there's a much wider landscape of possibilities.
So it's less about some external force coming in and more about us accessing a different way of seeing things,
Yeah.
maybe even a different way of thinking.
Yeah, exactly. It's about changing our internal state,
Hmm?
moving away from fear and towards trust. And when we do that, we become much more open to creative solutions and unexpected support, things we might have totally missed when we were so focused on worry.
Okay, I'm starting to get it. But it still sounds a little too easy. Like if I just change how I look at a problem, poof, it's gone.
It's not about pretending that everything is fine or ignoring reality. It's about recognizing that our thoughts and beliefs really influence our experiences. And by shifting those thoughts and beliefs, we can actually open ourselves up to new possibilities and solutions.
So if our thoughts and beliefs are so important, how do we actually change them? Does A Course in Miracles give any guidance on that?
It does. And that's where the practical exercise outlined in Lesson 80 comes in. It suggests combining reflection, relaxation, affirmation, visualization, and journaling.
Okay, let's break that down. What's the first step in this exercise?
The first step is to create a quiet space for yourself, somewhere without distractions. Then gently bring your awareness to the problem that you're facing, just acknowledging it without getting carried away by all the anxieties.
So no shoving it under the rug or pretending it's not there,
Yeah.
but also no dwelling on all the worst-case scenarios. Just a calm acknowledgement of what is.
Exactly. And then you incorporate deep, slow breathing to further relax your body and mind. It helps to create a space for a shift in perception.
So once we're relaxed and centered, what's next? Is that when the affirmation comes in?
Yes. Once you feel a sense of calm, you gently repeat the affirmation from Lesson 80. Let me recognize my problems have been solved.
And by repeating this affirmation, are we basically trying to convince our minds that the problem is already resolved, even if we don't see a clear solution yet?
It's not about forcing a belief or denying what's actually happening. It's more about opening yourself up to the possibility that a solution exists, even if you can't see it right now. It's about planting a seed of hope and trust in your mind.
I see. We're not trying to trick ourselves,
Yeah,
but we're trying to shift our focus from worry to a more open and receptive state of mind.
precisely. And this shift in mindset is made even stronger by the next step in the exercise, visualization.
Visualization, huh?
Okay.
So let's say I'm stressed about a ton of work I have to do. Am I just supposed to picture myself, sipping margaritas on a beach while all the work magically disappears?
Haha. That's a fun image, but not quite. The visualization that A Course in Miracles is suggesting is about picturing yourself successfully dealing with the problem, feeling capable and calm. So in your example with all the work, you might visualize yourself working efficiently and collaborating well with colleagues and ultimately finishing the project successfully.
So it's not about denying the work exists, but it's about changing how we feel about it, shifting from feeling overwhelmed to a sense of confidence and clarity. Interesting. What's the final step in this exercise?
The last step is journaling. You take a few moments to write down any insights or feelings or even intuitive nudges that came up during the exercise. This can help to really make that shift in perspective more solid and reveal hidden solutions.
It sounds like this whole exercise is about creating space for a different way of seeing things, which might then lead to a different way of acting. But how does this actually work in practice? Is it just wishful thinking? Or is there something more going on here?
That's a really great question. And to really understand it, we need to go a little deeper into how A Course in Miracles sees the nature of our problems. It argues that a lot of times, the biggest obstacles aren't the actual external circumstances, but the mental barriers that we've created around them.
So it's not about ignoring the problems, but it's about taking down those mental walls that we've built up that make them seem so impossible to overcome. I'm starting to see how this connects back to that idea of a divine solution. Okay, so we're back, and we're ready to get even deeper into this idea of a divine solution and how to actually use these principles from A Course in Miracles in our daily lives. Earlier we were talking about changing our perspective from fear to trust and using things like affirmations and visualizations. But how does all this really work in real-life situations?
Okay, let's imagine that you're dealing with a really tough situation at work. Maybe a project that's gone way over budget. The deadlines are coming up fast and everyone's stressed out.
Ugh, I think we've all been there at some point. That feeling of just wanting to crawl under your desk and hope it all goes away.
Yeah, it happens to a lot of people. But instead of giving in to that feeling of wanting to run and hide, A Course in Miracles encourages you to just stop, take a breath, and approach the situation with a different mindset.
Okay, so I'm picturing myself in that stressful work situation, taking those deep breaths, reminding myself not to panic. So what's next? Do I just start chanting, "My problems have been solved," and cross my fingers?
Well, the affirmation is definitely part of it, but it's not about just repeating words without any real feeling or meaning behind them. It's more about actively making a choice to shift your perspective, to open yourself up to the possibility that there is a solution, even if you can't see it at that moment.
So it's about cultivating a sense of hope and trust, even when everything feels really difficult. But how do we actually do that when we're surrounded by chaos and pressure?
It takes practice, of course. But one thing that can help is to focus on what you can control. In that stressful work situation, you can control your own reactions, your attitude, and your willingness to work with others to find solutions. You can't control what other people do or the external circumstances, but you can choose how you respond to them.
That makes sense. So instead of getting caught up in the blaming other people or feeling like I'm the victim, I can focus on being proactive and trying to solve the problem, even if it's a mess.
Right. And that's where the concept of forgiveness becomes really important in A Course in Miracles. And remember, forgiveness in this context doesn't mean saying that it's okay for someone to hurt you or pretending that everything's fine. It's more about letting go of the resentment and anger that are keeping you trapped in that negative cycle.
Okay, so I'm working on cultivating trust and hope. I'm focusing on what I can control, and I'm practicing forgiveness. But what if the problem is something I can't actually fix on my own? Like, what if it involves other people making choices that I don't agree with, or they're causing me pain?
That's a really important point. A Course in Miracles emphasizes that we can only really control our own thoughts, feelings, and actions. We can't force other people to change or to make different choices, no matter how much we might want them to.
So in those situations where we're dealing with other people's choices, how do we apply these principles without feeling powerless or resentful?
It's about recognizing that your own peace of mind doesn't have to depend on what other people do. You can choose to respond to difficult situations with understanding and compassion. Even if you don't agree with what's happening, it's about setting healthy boundaries and taking care of your own emotional well-being, even when things are tough.
So it's not about being passive or just accepting bad behavior. It's about recognizing that we have the power to choose how we react and how we protect our own inner peace.
Exactly. And this inner work, this change in perspective, can sometimes actually affect the world around us.
Really? Are you saying that by changing our own inner state, we can actually have an impact on external situations?
Yeah.
Well, A Course in Miracles would say that we are all connected, and our thoughts, feelings, and actions do have an effect on the collective consciousness.
So by choosing forgiveness and cultivating a mindset of trust and hope, we're not just helping ourselves, but we're also contributing to a more positive and harmonious world.
That's the idea. It might sound kind of radical, but it's definitely something to think about.
We've been talking about work challenges,
Uh-huh.
but I'm sure a lot of people are wondering how all of this applies to personal relationships, because conflicts with the people we love can be some of the hardest to deal with. How does A Course in Miracles approach those kinds of situations?
It encourages us to see those conflicts through the lens of love and understanding, to remember that everyone is doing the best they can with the tools they have in that moment.
Yeah, that can be tough, especially when you're feeling hurt or betrayed. It's easy to fall into the trap of blaming and judging.
Definitely. And A Course in Miracles acknowledges that we're all human and we all make mistakes. It encourages us to practice compassion, both for ourselves and for others.
So instead of getting stuck on who's right or wrong, it's more about trying to understand where the other person is coming from and finding a way to heal and reconnect.
Exactly. It's about being able to communicate your own needs and feelings clearly and respectfully, while also being open to hearing the other person's point of view.
This all sounds like a much more peaceful way to handle conflict. But I'm wondering if there are ever situations where it's just not possible or healthy to try to find that kind of understanding. What about situations where there's abuse or really toxic behavior?
You're right, that's a really important point. While A Course in Miracles emphasizes forgiveness, it's really crucial to remember that forgiveness doesn't mean that you have to put up with harmful actions or put yourself in danger. It's about finding peace and letting go of resentment. But that doesn't always mean that you have to reconcile with the person or stay in a situation that's hurting you.
So in those situations, forgiveness might look like setting boundaries or getting out of that situation or asking for help from other people.
Exactly. It's about putting your own well-being and safety first, both physically and emotionally.
This is a lot to take in. We've talked about changing our perspective, forgiveness, taking responsibility for our own reactions, and the power of compassion. It's clear that A Course in Miracles offers a really different way of thinking about and dealing with the challenges that we all face in life. But I'm sure a lot of people are wondering, what about actual miracles? You know, the kind that we usually think of, the amazing things that happen that don't seem to make logical sense? How does A Course in Miracles explain those?
That's a great question, and it's a great way to lead into the last part of our deep dive because,
Yeah.
the idea of miracles and A Course in Miracles is a little different from what you might expect. It's actually very connected to everything we've been talking about today, but we'll save that discussion for the next part.
All right, listeners, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to explore this fascinating concept of miracles, as it's explained in A Course in Miracles, and how this all connects to navigating some of the toughest parts of life, like grief, loss, and those big transitions. Stay with us. All right, so we're back. And we've been on this journey exploring all these different ideas from A Course in Miracles, talking about how we see problems, the power of forgiveness, and even how our own inner state can have an effect on the world around us. But we left off with a question. What does A Course in Miracles actually say about miracles?
Well, it's a good question, and it might surprise you to know that A Course in Miracles actually doesn't define miracles in the way that we usually think about them. It's not about things like parting the Red Sea or winning the lottery.
So no magic wands
Yeah.
or fairy godmothers.
Nope. Instead, A Course in Miracles talks about miracles as these shifts in perception, moments where we choose to see things through love and forgiveness rather than fear and judgment. And these shifts can happen in those small everyday moments or during those really big life events.
Okay, so maybe not the kind of miracles that we see on the news, but still pretty powerful. Can you give me an example of what this kind of miracle might look like in real life?
Okay. Let's say that you've been holding on to all this anger and resentment towards someone who hurt you in the past, and it's been weighing you down, poisoning your thoughts. Then one day, you just decide to let go of that anger, to forgive, that release that feeling of lightness and peace. That's a miracle according to A Course in Miracles.
Wow. Yeah, I can see how that kind of inner transformation could feel like a miracle.
Yeah.
But we've been talking about all these challenges and problems. So how do these miracles help us when we're going through really difficult things, like grief and loss? Because those situations can feel so overwhelming, so out of our control.
That's where those shifts in perception can be so important.
Right.
When we're grieving, it's totally normal to feel lost in sadness, anger, even a sense of unfairness. But A Course in Miracles reminds us that death isn't actually the end. It's more like a transition to a different way of existing.
So it's not about pretending that the pain isn't there, but choosing to see it in a new way, like focusing on the love and connection that's still there, rather than just a physical absence.
Exactly. It's about remembering that the love we share with those who have passed on, it goes beyond time and space. It's still there, and we can still connect with it. This change in perspective might not make the pain go away completely, but it can be a source of comfort and healing.
That's a really beautiful way to look at it. But how do we actually find that sense of connection when we're in the middle of grief, when the pain feels so raw and intense?
A Course in Miracles really emphasizes forgiveness in the grieving process. And remember, this doesn't mean saying that it was okay for someone to hurt you or that the loss wasn't a big deal. It's more about letting go of any anger or guilt that we might be holding on to, both towards ourselves and the person who's passed away.
So it's about releasing those negative feelings that are keeping us trapped in a cycle of pain.
Yeah, exactly. Forgiveness is an act of self-love and compassion, It helps us to go through the grieving process with more grace and peace, opening our hearts to healing and connection. And, forgiveness is a process, not something you just do once. It's something we might have to keep working on as we navigate all the ups and downs of grief.
This is giving me a whole new way of thinking about how to deal with not just grief, but any kind of major change in life. It's about finding that strength and resilience inside ourselves to move through tough times without being completely swept away by them.
I think you've touched on something really important there. The Course in Miracles tells us that we always have a choice in how we react to the challenges that life throws at us. We can choose fear or love, judgment or forgiveness. And every time we choose love and forgiveness, we're creating a miracle, both inside ourselves and in the world around us.
That's a really powerful message. And it makes me think about that line from A Course in Miracles that says, miracles are seen in light of forgiveness. Without forgiveness, they are merely illusions.
That's a good one.
This has been such an eye-opening conversation. I feel like I'm starting to get A Course in Miracles on a much deeper level. Now I can really see how we can use these principles in so many different parts of life. So as we're wrapping up this deep dive, is there any final piece of wisdom you want to leave our listeners with?
I think the most important thing to take away is this. You have the power to choose how you see the world and the problems you face. You can choose fear, or you can choose love, judgment, or forgiveness. It's a choice we make every day, in every moment. And the more we practice choosing love and forgiveness, the more we'll experience those miracles in our lives.
That's an amazing reminder. And it's something I'm going to be thinking about for a long time. So to all our listeners out there, thank you so much for joining us on this journey of exploring A Course in Miracles. We hope you've learned something new and maybe even found a new way to look at the challenges in your life. And until next time, keep on diving deep.